Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, Toys for Life C5. This is part 4 of the C5 Corvette A&A Vortech Supercharger installation. In this episode, we finally get to lay our hands on the beautiful Vortech V3Si Supercharger head unit. So let's get started right now. Finally getting towards putting on, instead of taking apart, parts of the car. So putting on the rear bracket that mounts to the cylinder head. It's pretty straightforward. Just make sure you look at the instructions clearly, get your bearings. I probably had this thing on and off 3 times, putting bolts in the wrong spot, because at the end of the day, all these threads need to be, these two need to be on the same plane, and these two need to be on the same plane. Also, where it goes into the cylinder head, there's 2 that go into the head, and then there's 2 that use where the stock serpentine belt adjuster pulley bolted. But the 2 that go into the heads, since those threads have not been cleaned since the day this car was built, I had to take and clean it out good with brake cleaner, air hose, and then run a tap through there, because otherwise the bolts just wouldn't go in. You certainly don't want to force them in. That'll be trouble. So clean those threads out in the head. Then I'm going to torque all these down to 37 foot-pounds. You know, it doesn't seem like it would be that hard to mount this head unit. I followed the instructions, but you know, there's just so many different things. You can possibly have a wrong bolt in the wrong spot, and you find it out a little bit later, and you got to take it back off. But anyway, the biggest things I learned here was I went ahead and put these radiator hold down units on because I was just having trouble getting the head unit mounted. And what I found out was when I put the new radiator hold downs on, I had to push the radiator forward a good 1.5 inches, 2 inches, and that gave me most of the space I needed. The other thing I needed to do is do a little trimming down here. You can't really see it, it's a little bit lower down there. And I had a wiring harness that was in the way. I had to relocate that, so I took a few of the existing clamps that hold it to the shroud and drilled new holes in a spot that would route the harness away from where the blower is going to be pushing air down into the lower part of the engine bay. Working on clearancing the shroud in front of the supercharger here, as best I could, per the directions, I did some clearancing with it off the car, which was super easy, but this thing here has to go on here, and I got to take a lot more plastic off. I'm not sure. I'm going to try to do it with like a die grinder. I wish there would have been some sort of a template or something that you could, and there's probably different shrouds that come through the different years, so maybe that's not possible, but this would be a lot easier to do off the car if I just knew where to cut it exactly. So I don't want to do it off the car and cut way too much, because it's either you can't put it back on, but this is definitely going to be more challenging doing it on the car. I'm going to get a die grinder out and see how much difficulty this is. Using a die grinder just wasn't going to do it, so this takes about 2 or 3 minutes to take off, which is the right way to do it. Here's the upper part of the fan shroud, so the blower is back here, and the air intake is going to be over here. And so I used a cutoff wheel and then a roll-lock disc to really smooth this area out. I did my best tracing it up top to make, again, I don't want to take any more than I need to, just enough to allow for the supercharger to flex with the motor a little bit. But I also noticed it just seems like this is as far as you can go down, because you got the fan spinning here, and it seems like I want to take more off there, but I can't, obviously, because it'll hit the fan. So the other thing I did is, these are the tabs that the shroud slides down as it attaches to the radiator. I just took a little over 1/8 of an inch off all 4 of these, 2 on each side, and beveled them again so they slide into their slots. Hopefully that'll buy me another 1/8 of an inch. Also took this time to cut out the upper fins on the radiator per the instructions, and I also fitted my air intake onto the supercharger to see exactly where I need to cut. I want to cut just enough again for the intake to move around a little bit with the motor, but not too much. Here's the tools I used. I used a cutoff wheel and a roll-lock disc sander. made pretty quick work of it, and I just covered the engine up really well and then blew everything off with compressed air when I was done. Okay, put everything back together here. It looks like the shroud is sitting a little bit lower due to the mods that I did to the little clip hangers that attach to the radiator. And the grinding did pretty well. I was able to get the coupler that connects the supercharger to the air intake on. I think, but you know, there's not an eighth of an inch to spare. It's tight. There's no doubt about it. So you want to make sure you get this thing trimmed as best you can, and I would lower that shroud like I did by another eighth of an inch as well, just for a little more clearance. Because remember, you know, the engine's going to torque a little bit on acceleration on the engine mount, so it'll be a little bit of movement. Hopefully this is sufficient. Well, time will tell. All right, I've mounted the first section of tube and the first coupler from the bottom of the blower, and put a lot of thought into how I want these hose clamps. And the way I've got this right here, it allows me to get a 1/4 inch drive ratchet up here and snug this up pretty easy. The top one I'm going to do next, I looked at it from the top of the vehicle, and I want to be able to tighten that one up from the top of the vehicle. If for some reason it ever falls off the blower and I'm out somewhere, I want to have at least a chance to have somebody kind of pushing up on it from below, and with a ratchet from above, tightening up the clamp to the blower to get it home so I can get it up in the air and do it the right way. So just something to think about. Okay, from the top here I've got the clamp that holds the first hose to the bottom of the blower. And you can see how I've got a 1/4 inch ratchet here. That gives you just enough room from the top to get your fat little fingers in there and snug this thing up. So if the thing ever fell off due to boost, you know, when you're on the road or something, at least you got a chance of hopefully getting it back on to get yourself home rather than a tow. This morning is all about playing with tubes and clamps to come up with something like that. We have a whole bunch of clamps here, but luckily each individual clamp is clearly labeled. This one here, for example, is 95 by 118. So a couple things. This kit comes with some nice packing. For every bag there's a packing sheet, and you can make sure you've got everything. That later on, if you can't find something, at least you know if you had it or not. So I've been doing this on everything, and so far I've got everything. I'm not 100% through the kit, but and it, you know, tells you what size they are and how many there are. So we're going to see if we can come up with something that looks like this when we're all done. Okay, well, getting the general configuration for the picture is not that hard. But the hoses fit on the tubes nice and snug, and they're grippy. So in the past, we've all seen the blower belt or hoses pop off on YouTube videos where they're on the dyno, and obviously with the lower boost levels of this, you know, 8 to 11 pounds or whatever this is going to be, that shouldn't be an issue. But these hoses are nice and grippy and pliable. The one thing I'm thinking about right now is the orientation of these clamps. This is where the supercharger is right up in here. So this goes up from the bottom, and I'm trying to figure out what's going to be the best way for me to be able to access tightening up the hose clamps. I don't know if it's going to be from the top or the bottom, but that's the next thing I'm going to try to think about here before I go any further. Under the car, once again, putting in the sheet metal to guide the air up into the intercooler and the radiator slash air conditioning core. Couple tricks. Just tape these on first to the side, because you can't get them on after the front panel. So just tape them onto the side. And then where the holes are in this front panel, on each side near the top, I've got wires behind there. So I'm gonna lower mine so that's not going to interfere with the wires on the back and potentially rub through after 20,000 miles. So really not too, the main bolts to locate this front panel, these are the two when you took your factory air cleaner off. It's kind of that Torx head rubber mounted situation. It's kind of nice because they locate off of those two holes, so you know you got that panel in the right spot. And then these side panels you can just match up to the front panel. So I'm going to drill these out. and then I'll be back to install it with the self-tapping screws. Hey guys, that does it for part 5. Please, as always, if you like the video, remember to hit thumbs up and to subscribe.